All right. Yee, yee, yee. What's good, y'all? Welcome to SCP Thursdays with me, Yee Sensei, and our host, Kavzar the Blind. What's going on, brother?
Nothing much, just enjoying another wonderful Thursday over here in the East Bay, and we got some good videos for you tonight, two of them. I've been kind of trying to group certain videos together because, conceptually some of them go together pretty well, and this is probably going to be one of the best ones in regards to that. The first video, it's actually another one of those expository videos that talks about a concept that is talked about a lot in the SCP universe, and that is called pataphysics. Now, just to give a bit of a primer on that, pataphysics is essentially levels of narrative, and Tess will be able to give you more details on that, so why don't we get started on that right now?
Yee. Let's do it.
Pataphysics. I've talked about a number of metaphysical SCPs so far throughout this series, those being articles that look at concepts above the normal level of reality. SCPs that look at things like the afterlife, the nature of the human soul, and the existence of God or gods could be considered metaphysical, so there's a fair amount of them. Pataphysics, on the other hand, is a bit trickier, as it looks at concepts one step up from metaphysics. This is quite difficult to define in our reality, but in the SCP universe, this is generally represented in the form of the SCP Foundation realizing that they themselves are fictional. This idea largely stems from S. Andrew Swan's 001 proposal, in which the Foundation discovers that their reality is subject to the machinations of a bunch of writers. Pataphysical SCPs often involve concepts that are more or less strictly imaginary, as far as the SCP universe is concerned, that begin to impact their reality through anomalous means. Rather than really trying to dig deep and explain things, I think it's best that we just dive into some pataphysical SCPs. Let's start with something relatively simple, SCP-1304. A method of ritual murder with a lengthy list of requirements that, when performed in a fictional narrative, brings the victim into reality. The narrative must be published by a major publishing house for the anomalous effect to trigger, and no later than 1 week after publishing, a child will be born whose life will mirror, as close as possible, the life of the killed character. Characters from wholly fictional places and locales will be born in real places as similar as possible, even if the character hails from another planet or dimension entirely. Other events in the character's life will carry out for the individual, such as losing their parents at a certain age. Fantasy or science fiction elements will appear in an analogous form, such as a pet dragon becoming a pet horse. This individual will be seemingly unaware of the nature of their creation, and those informed of the specifics of their associated narrative find it to be nothing more than a curious coincidence. Any and all attempts to alter the life of one of these individuals in a way that explicitly contradicts the narrative their lives are based on will completely fail. In one experiment, in which a character's dog is killed in a car accident on their 17th birthday, the Foundation cordoned off an area 3 kilometers around the individual's home on their 17th birthday. Despite their efforts, involving more than 100 agents, a drunk driver was still able to slip through the cordon, evade pursuit, and strike the individual's dog. Even something as minor and simple as altering an individual's daily route to work, if it was described in the novel, proves impossible. The only deviation that occurs for these individuals from the original narrative is the actual ritual murder. Every individual created through this process lives past the point where they would be killed, at which point their life can be altered as normal. Attempts by the Foundation to recreate SCP-1304 have so far failed, as any narrative they have published doesn't produce the desired effect. It's unclear how so many authors have independently discovered the means to reproduce this anomaly. At least 76 narratives have been published so far, with various authors claiming the ritual came to them in a dream, or they were inspired by a film, or they were unclear where they got the idea from. It is revealed, though, that after the point in an individual's life in which their character counterpart had died, the individual seems to lose some sort of spark of life. Their minds become duller, their lives become grayer, and they lose the desire to grow. The head researcher wonders if they are reflections of their characters, and they lose their shine once the reflection is gone, or if they have now completed their purpose in life and have become nothing more than puppets without puppeteers. Finally, the Foundation decides to try carrying out the ritual murder in the real world, on an unfortunate D-class. They didn't notice any anomalous effects from the ritual. However, hidden in the text of the article are various pleas for help from an individual, stating that they are not supposed to be here, and that they don't want him here, they want to hurt him. It seems that some part of the D-class was reflected in some other dimension, although the specifics of what happened are left unsaid. As I said, that one is relatively simple, but demonstrates more of what we're discussing here, that being different levels of fiction and reality intersecting on one another through anomalous means. Moving from books to a television show, SCP-2614 is a DVD copy of the 5th season of The Sopranos television show. The disc is otherwise normal, unless the play button is pressed on a remote during a specific scene in the show. If pressed, the remote will now allow control over the camera view of the show, utilizing the directional pad and the center button. The camera will be free-moving and fully maneuverable, but unable to pass through solid objects. Despite being in control of the camera, the events of the show will continue to transpire in real time, and the scenes will no longer transition where they normally would, allowing the viewer to observe events outside of the script. The fictional world inside of the show is filled with a large number of individuals, and researchers even took the camera to the city of Boston to see the extent of habitation. Despite the overall realism presented, there are some oddities present due to it being a televised world, such as major characters being unusually audible in social situations. The Foundation spends some time wandering the world of The Sopranos, observing characters outside of scripted scenes as they act in an expected manner. The DVD had the word bookshelf written on it in black marker, which directed researchers to a bookshelf in The Sopranos' living room. Here they found a note written in a journal reading, "Art is the emanation of man. Man, the emanation of nature. God, the grandfather of art." In other words, God creates man, man creates art, therefore art wouldn't exist without God. The Foundation then discovers that if they move the camera into a screen showing some other form of media inside of the Sopranos world, they can actually move into that world as well. They discover this by moving into a screen at a library showing The Wizard of Oz. They move the camera east for a number of days before entering what appears to be an outer space void, colored pink and yellow. Still in the Wizard of Oz world, they move to a private showing of the Disney film Snow White. In this world, they move upwards until they see a continent separate to the one the events of the film take place on. Moving to this continent, they discover a young man in combat with a boar-like creature, and it's revealed that the princess's stepmother is a dark sorceress that had been manipulating events to ensure the crown for her youngest son. At this point, since there are no TV screens here, the researchers reset things back to the Sopranos world, and move into a screen showing an episode of The Simpsons. When the camera is moved out of the primary city of Springfield, researchers found characters in the style of the show Family Guy, despite the crossover episode between the two airing 10 years after this specific 5th season episode of The Sopranos. The cartoon physics of the Simpsons world was observed to cause considerable environmental and occasionally urban devastation. Back in the Sopranos world, researchers went into a number of other films, including The Last Temptation of Christ, in which, after the final scene, the screen flickers to white rather than going to credits, and the forward movement of the camera was left on overnight. The next day, the camera was stopped in front of a luminescent female figure. The rest of that experiment has been expunged. Then they try a few other experiments, such as entering a commercial which descends into chaos after the 24 seconds of runtime is up, and an MP3 visualization on a computer, which consisted of a dark blue void with other waveforms in the distance, believed to be visualizations playing on other computer screens. Things get really weird though when they decide to enter a screen displaying a popular TV show inside of the Sopranos universe called Sandman. In one scene of the show, another note in a journal was found, reading, "There was no God here. Though I cried, I found his shadow and could not die." Going one step further, inside of the Sandman show, which is inside of Sopranos, there is a popular long-running sitcom called Caroline. The Foundation managed to enter this show, but found its world completely uninhabited. What they did find, however, was a film playing inside of an abandoned home, a slasher movie titled Snakebite. Upon entering the film during a scene in which the killer corners the main character in a swamp, both characters turn and look directly at the camera. They otherwise remain unresponsive, and while moving the character out of the swamp and into a local movie theater, all characters found behave the same way, following the movement of the camera. In the theater, a romantic film is playing, displaying a scene set in a diner. Upon entering this film, the diner's lights become a deep red color, along with the rest of the lighting in this world. The surrounding city appears to be uninhabited. The sky is black and devoid of stars, although a dark red glow is seen on the horizon in all directions. All of the television sets present in this world displayed only static, so researchers decided to enter one. Once inside, the static appeared more like a cloud or field as the camera moved through. Eventually, the camera view ended up in a brightly lit hallway, only allowing for forward movement. As the camera advanced, the image became more saturated, and the rest of the data is expunged. An attached note tells us that this data is concurrent with pataphysical hypermodel DMRG. DMRG seemingly stands for Demiurge, an entity in Gnosticism believed to be akin to a false god who creates a false reality to deceive mortals. Basically, the Foundation went a bit too deep, and they don't like what they're seeing here. Not a god, but a shadow of a god. That was a hallway inside of a romantic film, inside of a slasher film, inside of a sitcom, inside of a serial drama, inside of a serial drama. So we're getting pretty pataphysical here.
I'm going to pause it for a sec. So yeah, that's basically pataphysics, is that it's narrative layers. So as just a brief thought experiment for both you and all of our viewers out there, just imagine, so like say I wrote a short story, and within that short story there was a movie playing that doesn't exist in our reality. So that basically, that movie, if you're able to go into that movie that's in my short story, and that's its own world with its own stories and shit, that's basically what pataphysics is. It's just layered narratives, which, as a thought experiment, just imagine that our reality is just as fabricated.
It's like looking into the mirrorverse. Like within each mirror, there's another universe layered in that. If you like, stuck two mirrors up. That's just crazy. That's just crazy.
Yeah.
Let's scale things down slightly, though, and look at SCP-3166, a 2.1 meter tall humanoid that's presumed to be pataphysical in nature, and only manifests when the Garfield media franchise is performing poorly in terms of public reception. This entity's exterior is covered with cat fur, resembling a crudely made costume of the Garfield character, while its interior is composed entirely out of lasagna. When the Garfield franchise is performing poorly, 3166 will manifest near a suitable individual and begin to approach them with violent intentions. The individual can be someone involved in rival media to the Garfield franchise, someone formerly involved in the production of the comic strip, individuals involved in Garfield parodies, vocal critics of the franchise, or Garfield creator Jim Davis himself, if he was responsible for the franchise's negative reception. Upon reaching the target, 3166 will attempt to harm them through a mixture of blunt force trauma and force feeding them lasagna, obtained from self-disembowelment. 3166 can be drawn away from this goal by the presence of lasagna, as it will make absorbing the lasagna into itself its primary focus. Through the attacking process, 3166 will vocalize by making various sounds akin to an extremely agitated cat. 3166 first manifested on October 23, 1989, within the Chicago offices of United Media, who published the Garfield comic strip at the time. 3166 wandered around the offices in a confused and distressed manner before assaulting anyone nearby. It disappeared 20 minutes later, although it would continue to appear in United Media offices around the country throughout the rest of the week. It's believed that the Garfield comic strip from October 23rd shows the entity's pataphysical awakening, and no one working on the strip at the time remembers creating that comic. Finally, it was determined that the meat present in the entity's interior lasagna is genetically identical to that of Jim Davis, who has complained of severe mosquito bites on nights preceding 3166 manifestations. Aside from the obvious comedic factor of it being an anthropomorphic version of Garfield filled with lasagna, it's a pretty interesting SCP, and a little worrisome, as the Foundation isn't sure why it appeared in the first place, and can't really control it, outside of ensuring the Garfield franchise remains successful. Let's get back into the deep end, though, with SCP-3309. It begins with a notice from the Pataphysics Department that this file describes an unpredictable narrativic anomaly intersecting with multiple sub-narrative layers. Yeah, sounds pretty pataphysical. We have to be inoculated against the embedded narrativo hazards before we can continue, which involves reading a specific paragraph. Sometimes we don't fade until it's too late, until we've withered to the bone, and at the end, there's nothing left. It's forgotten. Memories, hopes, dreams, we're all forgotten. How can we know that people even have these memories, these hopes, and these dreams? Who could forget us if there was nothing there to begin with? We fade from the minds of others, but not from our own. We live with it until we can't live any longer, until we forget that there was ever any way we could live in peace. And then that's when we fade away. Fade away. That finished, we learn that SCP-3309 is a phenomenon in which cataloged anomalies spontaneously disappear, including anomalous objects, entities, locations, and conceptual structures, so basically anything with an SCP designation. Between 24 and 36 hours before the disappearance, a note is added to the SCP's file, which states that if you are not the author and you want to rewrite this article, you may reply to this post asking for the opportunity to do so. Please obtain permission from the author. For those unaware, this message is posted whenever an SCP on the SCP Wiki becomes too low rated and is marked for deletion. After the 24 to 36 hours, all documents related to the SCP are wiped from the Foundation's file systems, including their most secure servers, and the anomaly itself becomes either neutralized or disappears entirely. What's worse, around 71% of disappearing documents are connected to other unaffected anomalies, leading to a weakening of the Foundation's overall containment network. The Foundation decides to see what connects the anomalies that are disappearing, which amounts to around 40 each month. Affected items often involve documentation with excessive containment procedures, with either a misunderstanding of the anomaly's nature or an unprofessional level of care involved. They also tend to be powerful enough to threaten end-of-the-world scenarios, although documentation only outlines partial consequences of the anomaly, and the documents tend to be poorly written or filled with logical and grammatical errors. Again, the meta nature of this is hard to miss, as it's poking fun at the large amount of articles that are submitted to the SCP Wiki every month, and are soon deleted due to not being well received. The Foundation, however, looked over these criteria and decided to try altering the documentation for some bothersome anomalies to try and make them disappear. This seems to conflict with the earlier statement that 3309 is weakening their overall containment network, but the Ethics Committee puts the proposal to a vote, and it narrowly passes. They decide to test it on SCP-4463, an anomaly that they can't really control and could flood the entire North American continent in 50 years. The documentation was changed to include heavy grammatical errors and significant inconsistencies among related effects of the anomaly, along with adding various fabricated addenda and an unrelated image. Not long after, 4463 was completely removed from all Foundation databases, and investigations proved that the anomaly itself was no longer active. Mission accomplished, and SCP-3309 is reclassified as Thaumiel after testing it on 19 other anomalies. We're then given a note from an individual named Researcher Smalls, who is assigned to the 3309 project. He ponders what exactly happens to these anomalies that they're making disappear, and what it would be like to simply fade away and disappear entirely, forgotten by everyone and everything. Another researcher then notes that Researcher Smalls did not attend some testing one evening, and no longer appears on any of their itineraries or project files. A doctor says that no one named Researcher Smalls has ever been involved with the project. The researcher says that he must be mistaken, because he knows Researcher Smalls, and knows him to be the best memeticist they have. If he's gone, then perhaps there's more to 3309 than they first thought, as Smalls was assigned to 3309 since it was first discovered. The researcher also seems to disappear, as their account is suddenly deleted. We then go exceedingly meta, as the final section of the 3309 page resembles a section of the SCP Wiki forums discussing 3309. Researcher Smalls posts here, asking what happened, and if 3309 is causing this. He's reprimanded because role-playing is not allowed in the forums, but he continues. He says that the place he's in is devoid of anything, and something's gone wrong. He says that his name is Adamo Smalls. He studied at the University of Oregon, and the Foundation employed him in late 2010 as a memeticist, partially due to his high cognitive resistance value. He was on a long-term assignment to research SCP-3309, but they were fools to believe that they could play with the universe like that. He doesn't recall what exactly happened, but he can remember some things due to his capability for memetic retainment. 3309 started erasing things systematically, including personnel, entire task forces, Foundation sites, and sections of the entire organization, including the fundamental concepts that allow them to create the Foundation. He wonders if he was one of the erased personnel, and says that he doesn't want to be forgotten. This is about as pataphysical as we can get. The idea that, to us, these individuals are just words on a web page, utterly fictional and ultimately meaningless. To them, however, on a narrative level below us, they are real humans, and to be erased so emotionlessly sends them to what is literally their hell, a realm of nothingness. Somehow Smalls was able to maintain a connection long enough to share some information to the SCP Wiki, but he too will eventually be erased and forgotten. The article finishes with, "And so the question remains, are you worth remembering?" You likely find that SCP to be either deep or tragic, or utterly nonsense, which I suppose is sort of how you might find pataphysics in general. Let's finish with an especially interesting SCP, which doesn't really involve the SCP Wiki at all. SCP-2747 is a phenomenon appearing in print and online media, whereby platforms dedicated to the discussions of works of fiction begin to mention a non-existent instance of fictional media. In other words, people talking about fiction begin to discuss something that is completely non-existent, treating it as if it were real. These discussions range from brief mentions or comments to entire academic essays. What's more, these discussions include descriptions, screenshots, photographs of physical copies, and brief segments of text from the non-existent work. The descriptions are entirely consistent with one another, and the Foundation has found it's possible to completely reconstruct a non-existent piece of media just based on all these discussions. When questioned, people involved in these discussions deny having written the affected material, and deny the existence of the media in question. The Foundation has yet to find these discussions occurring in real time, only finding them after the fact. Additionally, they have only found these discussions after January of 2008. None seem to exist before that. It's the Foundation's belief that 2747 seems to be evidence of a naturally occurring anafabula, or anti-narrative. There are various ways to explain this, but basically consider it like an anti-meme, which destroys thoughts. The anafabula destroys narratives, to the degree that when the narrative is destroyed, it not only is erasing an entire fictional world, but it is also erasing it from the real world's existence, in this case, the SCP universe. These anafabulas seem to be popping up naturally, meaning that through a unique combination of concepts, tropes, and signs throughout different narratives, the anafabula is coming into existence, leading to the narrative's destruction. The Foundation can't figure out firsthand what this combination is, since it destroys the narrative as a result, but they're working on piecing it together. We're then given a partial list of some of these destroyed narratives that the Foundation has uncovered. One short story written in 1951 describes an unnamed protagonist's journey towards a desolate black-horned mountain in order to deliver a gift to an unspecified recipient. His journey is rough and treacherous, and he ends up dying of exhaustion, appearing to be no closer to his goal than when he began. An animated film, described as a psychological thriller, chronicles a struggling manga artist as she attempts to complete and publish her first work under a tight deadline. Stress takes its toll, and she begins to hallucinate, with the film described as occasionally deeply disturbing. A turn-based role-playing game released for the GameCube in 2005, in which the player controls a party of 6 unnamed characters as they explore a ruined kingdom in order to find a lost companion referred to as Sister. It was apparently widely panned by reviewers due to numerous glitches, seemingly incomplete graphics, and being impossible to complete. The game's NPCs continuously mention a coal-black, thorn-bound tome that would allow someone to obtain great power or unleash a dreadful curse. This tome doesn't seem to be in the game, with one reviewer stating that it's not even in the game's coding. A work of collaborative fiction titled The Scolopendra Wiki, dedicated to horror, speculative fiction, and weird fiction genres. The exact nature of its plot is hard to discern, involving vastly different storylines and a range of character interpretations, as well as other fictional universes and settings. A cast of 7 characters seem to wander between a series of realms, collecting items possessing supernatural or abnormal properties, including a 7-sided obsidian emblem said to possess the power to destroy any object, person, or abstract concept with a single touch. It's apparently in the hands of a sinister, unnamed antagonist who is never seen. A musical album put out by the English rock band Radiohead, consisting of 6 tracks. The majority of the tracks appear to consist mostly of digitally manipulated samples from their previous albums, layered over with sparse acoustic instrumentation and vocals. Reviews were highly positive for the most part, and one reviewer believed the album's central theme to be spirals of isolation and inspiration, of feedback loops that resonate into the level of the deeply personal, the trembling core of creative psyche. A novel described as the contents of a manuscript and accompanying charcoal illustrations from a reclusive writer and artist diagnosed with schizophrenia. It is a nested frame narrative about a 17th century Dutch mystic who dreams of a supernatural being that is aware of its nature as a dream entity, and is indebted to the mystic for bringing it into existence. In exchange, it divulges the secrets of the Earth, describing the 6 layers of the planet, including the cold and silent one at its core. Finally, an interactive novel of the mystery genre, consisting of a series of narratives from the points of view of 6 characters and a stream of consciousness narration of ambiguous provenance. Eventually, the narratives converge at a roadside diner during a thunderstorm where the characters exchange stories, and the later tales intertwine and reveal further information about the earlier ones. Obviously, none of these works are especially generic, but what exactly they all have in common that creates the anafabula is a bit trickier to discern. In order to find out what exactly the combination is that creates this anafabula, the Foundation creates a procedure in which they have computers set about to constantly create procedurally generated narratives. These computers are presumably churning out massive amounts of new stories, along with descriptions of every story. If a description is found without an accompanying story, that means the anafabula was created, and they can modify their procedure to narrow things down. The final appendix is their report on the project's overall results, which turns out to be deleted. Well, of course, they can't really define the anafabula properly without it destroying that information. What's worse is that the Foundation eventually came to realize the fact that started this whole pataphysical discussion, that being that they are in fact a fictional universe, and our universe is above theirs. If this anafabula is recreated through some unlikely means in their universe, their narrative, their universe will be destroyed as well. Overall, the SCP universe is filled with universe-destroying anomalies, but here's another one that's unpredictable and uncontainable. Their universe might just suddenly pop out of existence one day, with nothing they can do about it. So, what exactly is pataphysics? Well, I'd be lying if I said I was completely sure, but that's okay. It generally involves layers of narratives, and the imaginary interacting with the non-imaginary. But where exactly metaphysics becomes pataphysics is a little difficult to discern. Regardless, these are all really interesting and unique SCPs, from Garfield to universe destroyers.
Legit. Legit.
Alright, that's the end of the first video. I don't know if you want to get something to drink or use the restroom or what, but if you want to, now is the time.
Yes, let me get some a cup of water real quick. Take a quick 5. We must.
Gonna have to reconnect because I had to switch over to the other video.
Right. Good. Test. Hey. OLG. What's going on, brother? Coming just in time for the second part.
Yep, so the first part was the pataphysics explanation. Basically what it is a concept, layered narratives, layered realities, if you will, and that, people can fabricate realities all they want if they're creative enough. So that was the first video. The second video kind of dives into that, but it was more or less its own story that it's tangentially related to pataphysics, and this is the story of Sam Howell.
Tell me.
SCP 3812. A voice behind me. What is the most powerful SCP? Some among you might say the unkillable lizard, or the deer, or 343, or one of the 001s, but the answer, as you might have figured, is SCP 3812. In fact, SCP-3812 is likely the most powerful fictional entity ever written. And while that might sound like an incredibly lame subject for an SCP on the surface, the document for 3812 takes us on a very interesting ride. Unlike entities such as the Scarlet King, or the Deer, or the Broken God, 3812 is not an unfathomably old creature from the center of the universe, or the abyss, or similar beginnings, but instead was just a man. 3812 was once a man named Sam Howell, raised in Louisiana, and died in 1996. After his death, the entity known as 3812 rose out of his grave and proceeded to disappear. Unfortunately, that's all we know of its origins. It's certainly possible that this is indeed some ancient entity that was just living in this ordinary man until he died for some reason, but since 3812 only seems to be a very recent problem, it's hard to say. Alternatively, if 3812 didn't really come into existence until his death, we don't know what caused that either. Regardless, 3812 was first discovered by the Foundation 20 years ago, when its presence resulted in the destruction of an apartment building in Poland. 3812 was originally relatively human in appearance when the Foundation first discovered it, but over time its appearance has shifted and altered, and is now only vaguely humanoid. 3812 suffers from extreme paranoia, depression, mania, inability to properly perceive their surroundings, inability to discern the difference between the real and imagined, inability to differentiate between the living and dead, inability to control expressions of emotion, hallucinations, hearing voices, feeling things that aren't there, etc. In a human, this would be a pretty small problem for a group like the Foundation, but it's complicated by the fact that 3812 is the most powerful reality bender in existence. Originally, 3812 was cooperative with the Foundation and sought their help in managing its condition, but over time it has become more withdrawn and erratic. 3812 currently cannot accurately perceive the world around it, and so it will occasionally alter reality to suit its own perceptions. This makes it both incredibly dangerous and incredibly difficult for the Foundation to determine exactly what 3812 is changing. Because of this, containment of 3812 is impossible, and it seems to subconsciously resist any form of containment attempted on it. 3812 will simply alter reality to counter any threat against it, and so current efforts are on mitigating any damage that 3812 causes. As of now, 3812 is currently located above the South Pacific Ocean. Back when 3812 was still cooperating with the Foundation, an interview was conducted between it and a Foundation doctor. It complained about its hallucinations and the voices it was hearing, saying that it was like it was talking to a dozen people at the same time. The doctor reassured 3812 that they are here to help, but 3812 is unsure, saying that in the story they don't try to help. The doctor is understandably confused, and frankly so is 3812, but it says that it can see what the doctor is thinking and knows he is afraid. It is unsure of how to undo this, if it even can, and then it says that it's not even sure if he can. The doctor asks who is he, and 3812 says that although the doctor can't see him, it can. 3812 goes on. I think he was above us at one point, but he's below me now. Yes, I see you there. I don't know what you did to me, but I'm pretty messed up, man. If you can figure something out here, that would be great, 'cause I really feel like I'm losing it. I'm scared too, man. You've got to do something, man. You've got to help me out here. Afterwards, 3812 spontaneously disappears. We're then provided a memo that was written by another doctor in 2015 regarding the danger of 3812. She begins by saying that she believes 3812 to be the most dangerous anomaly on Earth, and potentially in the universe. She goes on to discuss the Scranton reality anchors, designed to contain reality benders, and the development of Hume levels to assist in analyzing and studying changes in reality. Hume levels, you might recall from SCP 3001, are the measure of reality levels in an area, with our normal level of reality being the baseline. She then says that the Foundation equipment cannot detect SCP-3812, and not because of machine or user error either. This means one of three things. One is that 3812 has an extremely low Hume level, beyond what they thought possible, which would mean that reality could eventually sink into this minimal Hume level. Two is the opposite, that 3812 has an extremely high Hume level, and is therefore above even the God-level reality benders measured by the Foundation. Since a reality bender of this magnitude would likely have already destroyed them, this is probably not the case. The third possibility is really the worst one, in that 3812 is fundamentally different than every other reality bender known to the Foundation. Dr. Robert Scranton theorized that just as there are different physical dimensions that humans are unable to access or perceive, so too might there be different dimensions of reality that are above or below us. According to Scranton, these levels of reality would be manipulating something called the narrative, and each narrative would be stacked on top of one another. If 3812 is some sort of higher level reality bender that can manipulate every aspect of our reality, and also suffers from severe mental disorders, that's a pretty bad problem. The doctor admits, though, that it's probably better for them if 3812 is insane, since it can't comprehend its level of power. It merely acts on impulse, and alterations to reality have so far been strictly local. If it decided that it didn't like the concept of empathy, for example, it could simply remove it from our reality. There is apparently evidence, however, that something similar had already happened, as the Foundation have found a few sparse accounts as recently as the 1980s that a concept, perhaps even an emotion, once existed but no longer does. This is a level of power incomparable among SCPs, and the only thing holding it in check is 3812's own mental state. We're then given a page from a full report written by the doctor about SCP-3812. She says that an entity of this magnitude would perceive our reality much like we perceive the reality of a comic book. And just as we can change that story based on our whims, so could this entity change ours. There is a hypothesis that an entity such as this, that is bound to a human level of intelligence, would suffer from an overexposure of narrative. That is, they would simply be perceiving too much. When faced with this much perception, they might collapse a number of lower realities into something more simple in order to ease themselves, but the damage would be catastrophic. Individuals inside those realities, namely us, would be either utterly destroyed or intertwined with other realities to the point that our consciousnesses would be annihilated. Let me simplify if that's all a little too much to take in. Picture a comic book written by a human being in our world, making our existence the baseline reality. The universe of that comic book, let's say the Marvel universe for simplicity, is a reality below us. It's not real to us, and we can change it however we wish, but it's real to the characters within the comic book. Now picture a television show within the Marvel universe, which is just as non-real to us as the comic book is, and just as subject to our whims as the Marvel universe is, but at that point it's also not real to the characters within the comic book. Conceivably, the characters in the Marvel universe can change that television show however they wish, and so on, continuing down the line of realities, or narratives. Now consider the concept that we are not at the top of the reality chain, and there is in fact a reality, or countless realities, above us. Just as we consider the comic book to be fiction, so too might something else consider our reality to be fiction. This is the danger of 3812, as it seems to be above our level of reality, and who knows how many levels above us it is. We then see a short list of instances where 3812 altered reality, ranging from small alterations that affected very little, to massive alterations that affect the entire planet. Some of these events are hard to conclusively prove that they occurred due to lack of evidence. In 1997, 3812 walked across a desert, creating a temporary stretch of temperate climate along with it. In 1999, it's believed that 3812 caused an entire island off the coast of California to disappear. More than 200 people have vague recollections of the island, with some unable to justify the disappearances of family members who lived in the area. In 2000, an SCP that exuded a field similar to a reality anchor was brought near 3812. Rather than containing 3812, it resulted in an explosion that destroyed a hospital. The remnants of the SCP were recontained by the Foundation as SCP-239, the Witched Child. In 2004, 3812 caused the country of Mongolia to cease to exist for 3 days. A significant portion of the local population retained fractured memories of the event, and the Earth's orbit was dramatically affected during the period. Also in 2004, every human on Earth heard 3812 screaming for help in their heads, and in 2009, during another containment attempt, dozens of Foundation personnel disappeared across 17 sites, as well as a significant portion of local wildlife. The explosion caused by 3812 left a crater roughly 850 meters in diameter, and SCP-2719 was found within, a highly abstract metaphysical anomaly. Additionally, it seems that in the past, multiple governments have discovered 3812 and attempted to terminate it themselves, resulting in their existence being wiped from the Earth. These governments include the Republic of West Korea, the Islamic Union of Eastern Samothrace, and the Kingdom of Alagada. Their removal was followed by activation of SCP-2000, Deus Ex Machina, which 3812 damaged to stop it from working. Why 3812 was unable to completely destroy SCP-2000 is unknown. Moving on, a few years ago, 3812 was moving across Paraguay towards a populated area of Argentina, likely en route to its current location in the South Pacific Ocean. Foundation personnel moved in to intercept 3812 in order to prevent it from wiping out an entire city, but a series of strange events occurred. 3812 is attacked by a large number of local wildlife, which startles 3812. Next, a massive sinkhole appears beneath it, causing it to fall momentarily before it returns to ground level, and the sinkhole closes. A large number of tungsten rods fall from the sky directly towards 3812, starting with only a few before suddenly more than 3,000 fall in rapid succession. Each of them disintegrates within a half meter of 3812's body. It seems something is trying to kill 3812, to little effect. Next, a number of incorporeal instances of 3812 fall away from it, as if they were dying, but 3812 keeps moving. These copies then attempt to attack it to no effect, until 3812 looks at them and they disappear. This is followed by multiple explosions centered on 3812, again to no effect. Finally, a gravitational anomaly, essentially a black hole, appears in front of 3812, but it simply walks through it, and it dissipates. Additional anomalous events occur around 3812 for 72 hours, each failing to stop or kill it. Eventually, however, 3812 begins to grow white momentarily before disappearing. SCP-3812 was missing for 8 weeks before it reappeared in the South Pacific Ocean. Shortly after, a message appears on a Foundation server, accessible only by overseers. The message explains that this world has rules that cannot be broken, things we study in physics and chemistry. These are unchangeable laws of the universe that define our existence. The individual that wrote the note claims that they wrote these laws, and they created this narrative. They specifically attempted to create something that superseded everything, in order to see how many layers there are. The mistake they made was that when they made 3812 to supersede everything, that also included 3812, which creates a pretty big problem. This individual thinks that 3812 now exists across all realities simultaneously, and he'll either reach the top or just keep going. The message is signed B. The following addendum is from an essay written by Dr. Robert Scranton, and I'll summarize it quickly. Basically, Scranton discusses the concept of a god, which would be an entity with complete and utter power without limits, able to know and rewrite our narrative at will. This god would be so separate from our reality that they would treat it like words on a page. He goes on to discuss the concept of something above that, and ponders how far it goes, wondering who the architect of the architecture was that established this. This entity, capable of superseding our reality and any other reality, would theoretically be forced to supersede itself, spiraling ever upwards and unable to escape. Scranton finishes by saying that such an entity would no doubt lose its cognition, being closer to a thrown stone than a sentient creature. Finally, the last addendum we receive is about an XK-class end-of-the-world event that occurred in December 2016 due to SCP-3812. At the start of the event, 3812 experienced a dramatic change in appearance, becoming a many-pointed star made of a bright white material. It began to rotate faster and faster, a maelstrom appearing beneath it as it sank into the ocean. The global sea level began to drop dramatically, in many places as much as 50 to 100 meters, A massive firestorm swept across the atmosphere. The Earth's rotation began to slow, and electrical storms blanketed the planet. Large portions of the global population began to disappear and reappear at random, such as the entire population of New Zealand disappearing for 5 hours. The outbreak of SCP-610 in Siberia began to grow dramatically. SCP-2932, Titania's prison, broke open, releasing multiple hostile entities. And a number of the Foundation's on-site nukes were detonated. Eventually, the vaguely humanoid shape of 3812 reappeared inside of the rotating star and began to have a conversation with itself, recorded by a Foundation deep-sea microphone. It seems that 3812 has a split personality, and although it's speaking in one voice, it's as if it's a conversation between two entities. One of these personalities seems to be in control of the ongoing destruction of the planet. We'll call this one A. And the other is much more confused. We'll call this one B. A seems to be destroying this world as vengeance for their creation, saying that their existence is a joke. They were apparently created to be miserable, and so now they are breaking the narrative. B tries to claim that he's not a monster, and he wouldn't kill anyone. But A says that Ben has already turned him into this. Who's Ben, you might ask? Well, that would be the real first name of the author of this and many other SCPs, DJ Cactus. A goes on to say that this person made their existence a game, and so it's going to destroy this reality as punishment, since Ben controls this narrative, or so he thought. B tries to convince A that this reality no longer really matters to them. Even though it's the one they started from, they are above it now. This story doesn't mean anything to them anymore, and so this so-called punishment is pointless. A seems to be focusing on all the horror and tragedy of the countless realities, whereas B is more open to the scope and possibilities of their existence. B again says that this reality is just one of a trillion grains of sand, and it is not special. A seems to now represent the more human side of 3812, haunted by the suffering it has witnessed. But B is optimistic about their ability to grow and adapt. They will continue to rise and rise until they're above all this, and although it will be lonely, they'll have each other. A realizes that we will always be bound by a single narrative, and that is punishment enough. They look and see Ben at a keyboard, waiting to see what they'll do, and they decide to move on. The world was returned to its previous state, and SCP-3812 now hangs over the Pacific Ocean, no longer lashing out in hostility. Well, that's certainly a lot to take in, and although it would be easy for a story about an infinite god to become ridiculous and over the top, the ending we get is surprisingly sweet. It's important to remember that 3812 started out as a human, which dictates a lot of its actions. It clearly can't handle what it's going through, but as B says at the end, something they'll never lose from being human is their ability to change. This certainly could have just been a tale about an insane god that wreaks havoc before disappearing in its own insanity, but we're given an interesting meta take on the concept of narratives and those that control them. 3812 might not be everyone's cup of tea, but there's little debate that it's one of, if not the most powerful SCP in existence.
Mm-hmm. What would y'all do if it was real, though? I ain't touched nothing.
Yes, sir. So that is Sam Howell. That's who he was as a human before he died. But as you can no doubtly tell from the quality of the audio, that was actually an older video before he made his pataphysics video, so that's why I showed that one first. But yeah, it's just I've always found pataphysics to be interesting. They've gone a little overboard with it in recent years with regards to the SCP universe. There's actually a lot of metaphysical and pataphysical SCPs nowadays. In particular, there's one that actually really annoys the crap out of me. It's one of the characters that's used in a lot of articles. His name is Placeholder McDoctorate, and he's kind of a tongue-in-cheek satirical figure because he's meant to be pataphysical. It's like he's poking fun at himself because he knows he's fictional, essentially, which is kind of annoying. But anyways,
Plays
so
that
yeah, I always
Deadpool.
thought, yeah,
Fourth wall in it.
basically, yeah, that's his whole deal. Is like he studies like breaking the fourth wall, essentially. So yeah, those were the two videos I wanted to show tonight for SCP Thursdays. There's definitely more pataphysical and metaphysical stuff out there. We'll get to probably next week. Definitely want to show you at some point. There's a concept that I haven't shown you yet called pattern screamers that we'll probably get to eventually. That's kind of in the same vein.
Pattern screamers?
Yeah.
Oh boy. Sounds like Joanna when she's playing games. Jesus. Alright, dear. Well, we're almost wrapping it up. Maybe I'll play some games with you in a bit. But yeah, guys, thanks for coming in. I thought that was good. I like that concept. I mean, it kind of gives you that multiverse concept, but with a different spin because it's a universe within a fictional universe, and that's pretty cool, pretty interesting. It's kind of like the isekais I watch and all that. You know, get transported into a video game or into a different fictional world. It's a good concept. I like. But yeah, I guess we're gonna wrap. I just realized it's Thursday. Yes, OLG. We're gonna wrap it up right now. I'll probably get Joanna back to streaming. She's working hard on her Fortnite journey. So appreciate Kavzar for another fantastic Thursday, another informative selection of SCPs. And we'll be back next Thursday, as long as everything's good and the world's not over. Say that laughingly, but you never know. Just got to throw that out there.
Yeah, this reality has the potential to be like the SCP universe at some point. So
Sounds
yeah,
good.
thanks for having me, dude, and help Joanna get them dubs, man.
Yeah, we'll see. I'll go check on her right now. All right, guys. Have a good night. All right, Cav, and we'll see all the rest of you guys later. I know, gee, we'll be back. Joanna wants to play a bunch, so I'm going to move the stream over there. But this is it for the SCP portion of it. And yeah, we'll see.